You did what?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this week's edition of Fake Accents Unite. I'm joined by the ever effeminate Britisher. Good evening, sir.
Hello, madam. Yes.
Bit of a minimalistic fake accents this week. It's just you and me, but I thought we'd bring our pre-stream conversation to the masses. Obviously, of people telling me I should stream on time. Well, we would have, but we were already so engaged, weren't we, British?
Yes, we were actually having quite a giggle before we actually came on. Of which, of course, we then pulled each other up, saying we should have gone live.
Really? Yes.
We kind of wasted that one. Yes.
What a waste of time. But what we were talking about, just to clue you in.
Well, what we eventually ended up talking about.
Oh, yes, of course.
We were already amusing each other prior to that.
We did end up in an anecdote about beer serfdom in the Middle Ages.
Precisely.
Yeah, it was.
Yes.
There we go.
You lot need to know about these things.
No. Not that you'd want to anyway, would you? But so we were discussing the British want some new artwork commissioned. Some of you may have seen the lovely work that at Core Dev from Twitter has done, who's producing his avatar, my old avatar, and the image of you, Britisher, with an Indian temptress wrapped around yourself.
Yes, he did it. I kind of asked him to do it in that manner so that it can kind of be disassembled, if you know what I mean. So I can be just standing there on my own, or I can have the Indian lady on her knees clinging to my legs. And it's kind of proved quite useful thumbnail art. So the avatar that he made, sorry, I kind of just use as the normal avatar, both the one you're looking at here and just the kind of regular talking avatar in my videos. But for thumbnails and whatever, that one has proved very useful. And I am playing with the thought of perhaps getting another one from him. And the last one, obviously, for those people in the know, is heavily inspired by Flashman, who of course is a figure I love dearly. But I was sort of thinking this time round, I might get inspiration, or I might let Mr. Cordev have inspiration from James Bond. So I would still be in the Britisher get-up. I mean, that's the whole thing about the character. It's the the red coat and the pith helmet. But obviously the pose and possibly the lady clinging to me could be inspired by James Bond.
Could you have your state of dress, shall we say, altered to fit the theme? So you still have the Britisher colours, but
I've been thinking about that, but I think I best try and stick pretty strictly. I was playing, for example, with the idea of why not go Avengers? Do you remember Steed with the bowler hat and the umbrella?
Yes.
It was always in a perfect three-piece suit.
Yes.
But I sort of thought, no, that breaks too much with the kind of the Britisher concept of the red coat and the pith helmet. It more than likely also wouldn't trigger the anti-colonialists quite as well.
And that's what you're all about, is it, mate? Like in full triggering British, trigger the colonials.
But I have one or two poses in mind. So I would like to stay away from the gun. The famous Connery pose where he's kind of there with his gun, close to his face. Because I've got the feeling sooner or later, YouTube is going to take offense to something like that. We might not be there yet, if you know what I mean. But that, was it a year ago or so, they started clamping down on sort of weapons channels?
Oh, yes. One of my favourite.
So in that regard, why waste money on something that may be banned within a few months anyway because it's got a gun in it? Do you understand what I mean? I am sort of playing around with one or two ideas where I've made sort of like little collages out of photographs in order to give him a bit of an idea.
I just imagine that you don't do this online. You're just sitting there, cross-legged on the floor, like putting little pictures
Oh, of
into
course.
like a
So,
scrapbook,
yes,
making your
yes,
collage. Yeah.
precisely. Yeah, and there with the paper glue.
Yeah, yes, with
that's
the
me.
with the
Yep.
you know those little plastic white spreading sticks.
Yeah, and for some
With the
reason, I always end up with 2 or 3 of them glued to my forehead. Yes.
oh, well, I wasn't going to go there, but thank you for revealing that to us, Britisher. Chat says, "Is the Britisher accepting submissions?"
Oh, well, technically
Use your
not.
words. Use your words, man.
Technically not, but then that's because I never really thought of it in that regard. This was
The Britisher would be more than happy to accept your submissions. Either send them to him on Twitter or
this
message
was
them to
yeah.
me, and
As
we'll
such,
get
this
them
was
to
me
him.
just talking aloud about what I was thinking of proposing to Court Ev. Because I mean, I think we can all see the kind of the kind of stuff Court Ev turns out. He's very good at what he does.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think you noticed you kind of took me somewhat aback. I was somewhat baffled because I never expected this coming my way.
Look, you have 30,000 subscribers. The odds that at least one of them is an artist that is capable and willing to produce channel art for you is something else, It's quite likely. But I would like to read you some of the comments about what this artwork should contain, if you
go
may
ahead.
like.
Yes, because I believe that was the reason you wished to continue that particular conversation.
Obviously, yes, I like to get the chat
on
involved.
air, in order to get the chat to basically tell us what they thought of it. Yeah.
So the Squire of Gothos says, "I figured it would be the Last Supper, except the Britisher replaces every person there."
Yeah,
so there's that option.
There's also the cost element of that particular proposal.
There's the Grand Duke of Middlesex says, "Whatever it comes to, it needs a mustache." When can we get the Melchett Britisher? That's what we need. We need the Melchett Britisher to take over as a master of your domain. Like you just need to go through a phase, Britisher, just like, I don't know, 6 months or something with that. I believe you were mentioning something to that effect about me once upon a time, but as you noticed, I couldn't handle it. Davey1602 says, "We need a vat-brained Britisher with a collection of cybernetic bodies." So it's your brain in a jar, sitting in there with like an assembly line where you can be slotted into any number of.
Yeah, no, I mean, I enjoy the thought, but of course that's your fantasy, not mine.
I don't know what you're talking about, man.
My fantasy still kind of circles around myself being the debonair man of the world with some buxom woman clinging to me. So I'll stay with the Flashman / James Bond theme.
You live in
you can do the glass jars and formaldehyde.
All right.
Kind of thing.
Well, I'll stick to cyberpunk, and you can have your kind of 20th century roleplay fantasy, sort of 19th, 20th century empire.
I mean, you forget, of course, that I lived through all this.
Well, obviously, but that's why I assumed
you'd something like 6,000 years old.
This is why I assumed that you wanted to think about something in the future that you may not have experienced yet. Not the same, but then again, you've been around for 6,000 years, so we know already how egotistical you are. And how much you desire to relive your past glories. So, is that.
Given that I once was the pharaoh, I mean, egotistical kind of comes with the job description.
I tell you, having some streams with you is very good for my imagination, because I have now images of the Last Supper with you as all of the characters. I now have an image of you in full resplendent pharaonic dress.
That's very much me.
With the rod and the staff in your hand.
Everywhere around me, everyone just groveling in the dirt.
Of course, we'll just add that in there. And they all have AA's face. Why is that, Britisher?
I don't know. No, I mean, he was. I believe he was the kind of a lesser king of Mesopotamia, while I was building pyramids.
A lesser king.
He was building towers that toppled. I built pyramids.
I see. Makuta Pterodax has donated £5. Thank you very much, and says, "The Himalayas became the abode of the Britisher when the Great Wall of China became unsuitable for him to sit on, whereupon he became a Greek god." There you go.
Okay. Then again, I think the Greek gods actually resided on Mount Olympus rather than the
Just a
Himalayas.
touch.
But we'll go with Himalayas. I mean, it's big enough.
I mean,
Yes.
Everest is bigger than Olympus. So
Do you? I don't know if you ever saw that that episode of QI in which Stephen Fry actually informed the world
that episode.
that technically it should be pronounced Everest, and not Everest.
Yeah, I know, but
yes, it's because actually it's not. People kind of think it's more than likely from Everest, that it's something kind of some allusion to eternity or something like that. Whereas it actually was named after the chap, I believe, who is in charge of mapping India.
Oh.
So it was some of his assistants that went up there, if you know what I mean. And in order to kind of toady to him, they named it after him. Obviously the biggest mountain.
Oh, I
and
see.
He was actually a Mr. Everest, not a Mr. Everest. So,
and I'm sure his entire family line has been pissed ever since.
Yes, technically it should be Mount Everest. But there you go. It kind of shows that we weren't in the toadying mood.
There you go. So Blue-Footed Booby says, Britisher needs to be in a bowler hat. Britisher and Bingley.
Well, as I say, the bowler hat, that would be the Steed theme, wouldn't it? That would be the Avengers, yes.
People are saying, Scowen says, no, we need Britisher in a bowl. Regimental jacket and dining gear.
By the way, when it comes to bowler hats, that is, of course, one of those moments where the Americans are once again sort of criminally ignorant, because they refer, for some reason on earth, they refer to it as a derby. So not only do they name it after a town in England,
yes, right,
but they even mispronounce it.
Yes, it's Derby, not Derby.
So yes, it should be, if you want to call it that, then it would be a Derby hat. But no, they refer to it as a derby hat. So when somebody is talking to you about a derby hat, what they actually mean is a bowler.
Oh, Britisher, why can I hear the sound of many sleepless nights tossing and turning over this?
Oh, this is nothing compared to my irritation over the word schedule.
You mean schedule?
Yes, precisely. I mean, one of the worst incidents of the use of the word, or the misuse of the word schedule, was one of those hideous sequels to Pirates of the Caribbean, where is it Ian McShane, the guy who played Lovejoy.
Okay.
I believe he plays Blackbeard or some other pirate in it. In it, he actually has a conversation in which he says he doesn't think this would fit into his schedule. So not only have you got a 17th century pirate using terminal, or is it 18th century? I'm not sure. But not only have you got a pirate of that sort using the word schedule, but then not even pronouncing it in the way of his native tongue. So what can I say?
You don't need to say anything. You don't need to say anything, Britisher. I can hear your tears.
There is only one word that could possibly encompass my irritation, and that is Americans.
Froggy has donated £2 and says, cheers for introducing us all to Grim Jim, for fuck's sake, Britisher. Do you want to explain this one to anyone who doesn't know?
Yes, Grim Jim, Grim Jim as such is a YouTuber who I think should get more attention. However, there was, how can we say, a Brexit debate that began on Twitter, and let's just say it got kind of out of control. And I kind of dipped in and out of it, but it was one of those things where you could kind of see that it was a snowball that was rolling down the slope, and it was getting bigger and bigger, and it was gathering more and more pace. So more and more people were joining in on either side, and yeah, it was one of the most unreasonable things I have ever encountered on Twitter. And then if that wasn't enough, when you sort of think, okay, yeah, fine, it's now, the kind of Brexit versus FBPE crowd are slowly running out of arguments and insults. So they've thrown everything at each other that they can throw. What do? They go on to transgenderism. And then from that, once they've exhausted that, so it's, I think at one point, the academic agent kind of just tweeted, "What the hell is going on? My entire Twitter feed is blocked with this."
Yeah.
Once they were finished with transgenderism, they started going hammer and tongs on the nature of socialism and fascism.
Oh, for goodness sake. On that perfect debating platform of Twitter, of course.
Yes, yeah. So they must have filled about, 3 or 4 days of just non-stop drivel. And you just, at some point, you just lost the will to live. But for a while, you tried to keep up. You tried once in a while to take part, but eventually you just threw your hands up in the air and went, right, do your own thing. I don't care anymore. So yes, I share Froggy's pain, is all I can say.
It took place over days, didn't it?
Yes, precisely. This was a prolonged war. This was not like the Battle of Waterloo that was over in a day. This was more like Verdun, that just went on for weeks.
You're comparing a battle where people lost their actual lives to a Twitter conversation that got mildly heated. It's just like, come on. I mean, I'm impressed that they managed to keep engaging without getting completely
people are talking of the culture war. So if it is a culture war, then this clearly was a battle.
Yes, fair enough.
But I did put out a question regarding Froggy, which may have been missed because, of course, in this complete avalanche of nonsense, a lot of stuff got missed. But I actually asked the deeply metaphysical question of, if we ever were to have a live stream, or even just a Twitter conversation, between Jordan Peterson and Froggy, would that cause a rift in the time-space continuum?
I think that many people would Kermit suicide.
There is that. Yes, there is that possibility indeed.
It would be an event that would rock the ages. But to move on from the Twitter escapades of the British and friends,
frog-like leap, you mean? Yes.
Yes. Makuta Pterodax has donated £2 and says, "The Himalayas are the ultimate fence. Olympus will not do." So there you go. And we have a question. So Blue Nowhere 999 has donated $5 and says, question: what is the Britishers' ideal outcome Brexit?
Well, it depends.
No one cares what mine is.
Okay, yeah. Let me bestride the Himalayas.
One foot upon either continent. Yes.
Yes. So basically, I've got 1 foot currently, sort of firmly planted in Bengal, and the other one somewhere in Central Asia. So it depends, because I would say there is an ideal outcome, and there is the ideal outcome to be reached as we are now. So the original ideal outcome was we would have a competent prime minister who would sit down with the EU and would negotiate a reasonable deal, and would be quite willing to do a kind of Margaret Thatcher and handbag them once in a while and just say, no, I'm not doing this. And frankly, I'll bring the whole timetable of the European Union to a standstill by vetoing everything unless we achieve something reasonable here.
Talk about what you would consider reasonable, though.
Well, I mean, that we basically try and leave the EU with as useful a trade deal for both sides as possible. Of course, there would be more than likely some limitations, but it should have been possible, rather than this abject capitulation with there for some reason having a say on our military bases in Cyprus and Gibraltar, something that irks me particularly. But that never happened. The woman was an incompetent. She came back with her deal and has been trying to force it down our throats ever since. And that's where the other option comes in for me, and that is that became plain to me the very moment she made her presentation regarding her deal. And once we kind of got to read some of the details, and that is, it has to be no deal. But I want to make it plain, as far as I'm concerned, no deal is not ideal. That is not the thing I would seek. But given that she screwed it up so royally, and given that obviously the EU actually, they can quite rightly say, look, we agreed this with your government. So I mean, how are we supposed to agree any end of negotiations if your government can't be relied upon to actually deliver, the parliament? So I do have some sympathies with the EU, albeit not many. But when it comes to our situation now, I mean, once she basically presented this rotten deal and it was clear that we couldn't accept it, as far as I was concerned, it then had to be no deal. Now, no deal will do damage to us.
Yeah, they reckon, what is it, 7 to 12% economically?
I think it's impossible to ascertain. That's just
Yes.
it. Now, if it were 7% economically, that would be very severe. Always consider that the credit crunch, so the actual financial crisis, did something like 6%. So if we were to be hit by something like a 7% recession, if you know what I mean, that would be very, very severe for us. But there is nothing to say that it would have to be that severe. When you hear people like, dare I say his name, Grim Jim, say, oh, well, there are estimates that are 10% or even 12% or 15%. Well, yes, I'm sure that, Labour Party HQ has come up with some figures. But, you have to see it realistically.
Diane Abbott was on the case.
Yes, precisely. Yes. If you look at the severity of if you look at the severity of the credit crunch and how badly it affected our economy and how everything kind of ground to a halt, you would have to ask yourself, why would the economic interaction between Britain and Europe grind to a halt that severely? There isn't really that much of a reason.
It wouldn't, especially, I mean, if you're talking, no one really wants to lose, right? So Germany has just had its first quarter, or its first financial period, where it's been predicting not a recession, but a 0% gain. So it's on the cusp. And France is France in recession at the moment? I can't remember. Belgium is. I don't know whether or not Italy is at the moment, but basically all of these places which will only get worse if they lose our imports. And everyone there is on a knife edge. And one of the things I really hate is when people say, especially Remainers, oh, look at all the damage that Brexit's already done to our economy, which is quite a laughable statement, really, because across the board, all the economies of Europe have suffered in the last 3 years, and we've suffered, I mean, relatively well. I think we're the second least worst. I mean, that's an awful sentence construction, but like, we've done the second best out of the other economies, and we have still had a bit of a dip, but we've had nowhere near as much of a dip as a number of other economies.
Yeah, I think that the one thing I always caution about when it comes to those kind of things is that it's cyclical. That effectively, the various economies tend to operate on somewhat different cycles. So there can be times when we will do better than Germany, and there are other times when the Germans are doing better than us. And it's that that was one of the reasons, in fact, why we didn't go into the euro. Because we felt that we were not running on the same cycles as they were. And that therefore,
thank God we did not.
Yes, thank God we did not. And therefore, if you would have put us into the same currency and the same restrictions, that it would either work desperately against them or desperately against us. And for other reasons rather than cyclical reasons that are entirely structural, that's why it's been murdering the southern European states, the entire Euro project. Why the populations of southern Europe still do not want to leave the Euro is beyond me.
Yeah, it seems very strange. I do remember a decade ago or so where they were talking about the fact that a number of governments were printing their old currencies again. But I don't know whether or not they just now sit in bank vaults or whether or not that
Chances are they will just sit in bank vaults. It may well have just been done while the Greek crisis was going on to the fullest. And if you remember, there was a period where Merkel couldn't make up her mind. And it was reported afterwards that Nicolas Sarkozy had effectively had a phone conversation with her. And he had basically lost his temper with her because she was still not wanting to take a decision. It sounds familiar, that really, doesn't it? It sounds like some other female leader of another country.
But no, I'd never guess. Yeah.
And eventually Sarkozy said, look, you either make up your mind now or there won't be any point to it anymore. And that's when he finally managed to get her to move. And in fact, once that became public, and it's never been disputed by any of the parties, so obviously somebody in the room on the French presidential end must have leaked this. Once that became public, it did somewhat damage Merkel's standing, because it kind of showed that she was the one dithering, and the leader of a foreign country needed to kind of come in and say, move.
Yeah. Before she'd actually do her opinion, because she had fairly solid opinion ratings for what she's been in 22 years now or something like that.
Oh, it's an incredibly long time. Yes.
Yeah, and for the first time since really she started her work as the premier of Germany, as it were, she's finally in a weak enough position that other parties can get in on it.
Well, of course, it's, wasn't it Bill Clinton's campaign that famously said it's the economy, stupid? Because, things have been going fairly well for Germany, particularly because of the euro. Yeah. Germany has benefited incredibly from the euro being artificially depressed by the gruesome fate of the southern European countries. That they are effectively keeping it low, which is, of course, allowing the Germans to stay competitive with their exports.
Yes.
And in that regard, they have been massive beneficiaries from the euro. So they have had a sort of strange artificial boost.
Germany benefiting from the subjugation of other nations? Never.
Well, this is just it. I mean, it's not subjugation. It's having talked somebody else into some strange union from which the other person at the end, doesn't want to leave, because either they've been so propagandized that they believe it's still wonderful, or they feel we've suffered that much to stay in this currency union. If we now leave, it will all have been for nothing. Do you understand what I mean? That there's some strange psychology going on there, because there
is something
that it doesn't work for the southern European country.
It doesn't work economically, but there is some credence to the idea of the vote-winning nature of the all-in-it-together rhetoric, and the kind of general sense of free travel between borders, an average citizen who's not really interested.
I fully understand that, but as I say, that doesn't really apply to the currency, because they were all in the EU, they were all following the we're all in it together thing. But when it came to the currency, that turned out, it wasn't foreseeable. The EU, the euro could have been a spectacular success. Nobody could really foresee it, but it has turned out to be a catastrophe for the the Mediterranean countries.
Yes, indeed.
It's just so bizarre that when it comes to polls and whatever in those countries, the people still want to stay in it. And you just wonder what on earth is going on there.
And we will come back to this, I'm sure. But I just want to get through the last couple of super chats and then on to the main topics for the evening. So Scott Anderson has donated $2 and says, Britisher has the best martial metaphors. I was going to say that he has the best marital metaphors, and I didn't understand what it was referencing, and I realized that it was both. And there you go. So that's what I'm thinking when it comes to that. But no, what I wanted to talk to you this evening about Britisher mainly, and I can see there's a tailed feature in the chat. Good evening, sir. Basically, you may have seen on my channel in the last couple of days that a couple of discussions, interviews type things have gone up regarding a certain Gerard Batten, the leader of UKIP, and Alan Craig, who's the families and children's kind of spokesperson for the party. And I'm curious what you've thought of those. I'm curious what people in chat have thought as well. So if you want to put that in there.
Well, first off, in that case, I must already confess that I didn't see that there was a Gerard Batten one that had gone up. I saw the last one that went up. So
I see.
I've obviously, in that case, remiss of me, I have missed one. I did see the one of the kind of child policy spokesman.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, I'm trying to think of some way of addressing tail feature in the chat now that you've kind of pointed that he's there, but my Bulgarian isn't that fluid.
Boomer audio. Yes, people were moaning that the second interview had the balance was off, so it only came through one headphone if you were wearing headphones listening to it. And I, being the person that I am,
who notices the boomer, these things?
People who listen to everything through headphones, unlike me, who just took the video that was given to me by the editor, had a brief listen through it while I was doing the ironing, and then put it online.
I'm kind of waiting for the day when somebody complains to me that the sound quality is not Dolby Stereo or something like that. It's just.
But no, so yeah, I was stuck. I will probably re-upload it in mono, but because like half the comments are not commenting on the interview itself, but my poor neglected right ear.
I could imagine you being the person who somehow, I mean, now that you were telling me you've interviewed Gerard Batten, you've interviewed Chris Hitchens, you've interviewed whatever this child policy chap is. I could see you one day sort of standing on the tarmac of the airport, interviewing Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un, before they fly back to their respective countries.
Yes, high-fiving.
There will be people complaining about the airport noises in the background.
The high five that I give Steve Bannon or something being too much. People are saying, get a suit, please. Thank you, Matchstick. You paid $2 to tell me to get a suit. I was going to wear my suit, and I tried it on, and it's too small. So I need to both hit the gym and get a new suit. That's the main takeaway I took from that.
Well, I've been telling myself for the last 3 years that I need to start swimming again, but there you go.
Yeah.
I'm kind of gradually turning into sort of a human form of a matchstick. Yeah, I needed to stop swimming because my back was just killing me. So the reason I was doing the swimming is because it helped relieve my back. But then at some point, it kind of became counterproductive. And rather than helping the back, it made it worse. So I needed to stop. But I've since managed to kind of untangle 1 or 2 problems in my back. So it might now be time to start doing it again in order to kind of, strengthen the body a bit more.
I understand. The cerebral back is a difficult place to exercise, but as you swim around in your brain jar,
precisely.
I'm sure it helps.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. But going back to, so you haven't watched the Gerard Batten one?
No, I've not seen that one.
The extent of that was basically him talking about how much he dislikes Nigel Farage and the Brexit Party.
Oh dear God!
Just because
Nigel
has been on the attack.
Did you afterwards find any clips about him speaking glowingly in the past about Nigel Farage while he was still his leader?
He also was talking about, let me think, he was talking about some of the policies, the relative success of the the Brexit Day march. Like, he was pleased to see people out there, and it was a bit of a call for fundraising. I think that was the main thing. It was good to chat with him. He was an interesting bloke. They're quite keen, him, the rest of UKIP, obviously, and Sargon, for me to join UKIP, which is would be a big political statement and decision for myself. But I don't know. I feel like I talk to many people in UKIP, and as someone who tries to distance himself from political affiliation, shall we say, in this day and age, I was just wondering what your opinion on UKIP is at the moment, and what you think of it.
My opinion on UKIP is as follows. First, for a long time they were just basically another version, a more right-wing version of the Conservatives, because for a great deal of time, a lot of their personnel were just old Tories. I mean, even now, you've still got Neil Hamilton being a very prominent member of UKIP. So you can kind of see the pedigree was largely Tory. Now, a lot of people assure me that since then a lot has changed. Well, okay, I don't know. I don't know the inner workings of UKIP, if you know what I mean. I did remember that. I do remember that. That rather despicable character. You may recall what I'm talking about. Who had a private conversation on Hangouts, I believe, with Sargon and V, and recorded it, and then released it when it suited him. Does that ring any bells with you?
Yes, I believe his name was the Academic Agent. No.
No.
No, I know. I know.
And yeah, he was just an absolutely odious creature, and totally into Christian values and this, that, whatever. So totally pro censorship, and he was taking objection to people like Dankula and Sargon coming into his party. And it's things like that obviously have, let's say, sort of colored my view, if you know what I mean. So to a certain extent, I still regard them as very much Tories. And when people sort of say to me, "Oh, well, yes, but they're committed to free speech," this is just it. I struggle to see that commitment. I don't ever see them making a big thing about it. I've never heard Gerard Batten speak at length about free speech. And if that is addressed, it's always couched in terminology that is very specific, as opposed to ever having the kind of courage to take up what might be a controversial position, might actually get the media to attack you over it because you have taken a position. So you never get them to sort of come out and say, we're not bothered what people get up to in their private homes. You can watch on the internet whatever you want. We don't care, because particularly with things that the government has just announced today, that would go very much against the sort of current media or current establishment thinking. But you never have them be quite that brave about their convictions. Now, I know that people like Sargon and Dankula, they are very much on board with that. But to what extent do they actually represent the kind of mainstay of UKIP opinion? I have absolutely no idea.
This is the funny thing. So the thing which gets me about UKIP, until very recently, their average age was above the UK retirement age. So that was one thing. So they were very disconnected from kind of like multi-generational issues. They were just very one-generational. They also, as you say, are politicians. So the hard stances on some things like that, just I haven't seen them. They may be there, but I haven't seen them. And then you get people like Sargon, who's there, and they're quite open about the fact that they've chosen social media personalities specifically. They're welcoming to them because of the extra reach they can give them. So, for instance, Sargon and a couple of other people have been helping streamline the UKIP official YouTube channel. I think they're up to 35,000 subs now or something like that. in the couple of in a month or so that they've been running that, and they've overtaken all the major parties in that regard. Although obviously it's a global audience, so who knows? And how many of them are there for Sargon and not for UKIP? Who knows? Yeah. So it's as I say, it's a funny one, but Sargon's convinced that he and with the help of others and generally, like, it's not just all him, is like, if I can convince enough people to join UKIP, we can do what I was talking about probably at the beginning of last year. We can make UKIP and its policies whatever we want, really. He has no interest in taking over and becoming leader or anything like that, but he believes that he can be a part of a voting bloc that can effectively swing UKIP a little more centrist, but also add in policies that he wants. So, for instance, all the kind of hardline stuff on free speech. Now, whether or not he'll achieve that, I don't know, because despite their membership growing, I think they're about 28,000 now. It's still like a way off from even something like the Liberal Democrats. I think the Tories, in particular, for instance, for every £1 UKIP makes, the Tories make 500. So in terms of a financial disadvantage, there's that. Yeah. Of course, UKIP is arguing from the perspective of we may only be polling at 8% and we can't win many seats with that, but we can lose an awful lot of people their seats. And so we can be a threat in that regard, and therefore people will take it seriously.
They can be a thorn in someone's side, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, when it came to their biggest achievement so far, that was the referendum. And that was called by the Conservatives, but it was called in order to try and alleviate UKIP pressure. But then, in all fairness, at that particular time, had you asked anybody in the country to name one UKIP politician, and that would only have been one anybody could have named, it would have been Nigel Farage. So in my view, they have still lost their star performer. I think, to my mind, UKIP was very much a kind of one-man band, and it was Farage. Now we're getting a lot of talk of, oh well, he's yesterday's man. He's completely useless.
I mean, the funny thing with Farage is that in the current iteration, his Brexit party, and it's been interesting to talk to existing UKIP members and a variety of them, and they all say pretty much the same thing, that Farage was a very difficult man to get on with professionally, because he's always been a bit of as you say, a one-man band. He wants to do everything himself. He doesn't want the NEC, for instance, and NEC to oversee any of his decisions. He wants to run everything. So in the same way, I find it bizarre, his Brexit party is set up to remove membership. So it doesn't want membership. He wants subscribers. So people will pay a fee, but they won't have any voting rights within his party, and he can do whatever he wants. He's like, that will get rid of all the bureaucracy that has got in the way of me exerting my will, shall we say.
Yeah.
So there's that.
I mean, it basically, it's a blatant admission that this is a one-man show. That's what it really means. I mean, I was unaware of those details, but they don't surprise me, because Nigel Farage is very much a sort of one-man political player, but somebody who seems to have an extraordinary knack of playing that game.
He does, but I don't think he can win this one. When it comes to UKIP itself, like in its current iteration, it is in a strange place, but it was on the floor financially 2 years ago. It was about to go bust, and it's now trending at it's now financially stable, and it is trending at 2/3 its previous peak performance.
Yeah.
Whether or not that's to do with the current political climate of everyone being so fucked off with everyone else.
UKIP's one policy, really, I mean, let's be fair. I mean, yes, I know they've tried to branch out and become about more, but it's about Brexit.
Mm-hmm.
And what is the one subject that has obsessed the nation for the last 2.5 years?
Oh
Brexit.
yes, Brexit.
So, in that regard, yes, it doesn't really surprise you that a party that really circles that one subject and was really brought to prominence on that one subject that that party should come up, if you know what I mean. When it comes to I mean, I put out a tweet, I remember, some time ago when Gerard Batten said something, and it appeared in my Twitter feed for some reason. I'm not subscribed to him, but somebody else liked it or whatever, so I got to see it. And I just basically sort of pointed out, leaders of the Labour Party, in I don't know, the last 3 years or something like that. The Conservatives was Theresa May, Labour Party was Jeremy Corbyn, and UKIP was 3 or 4 different names. And you can kind of, so basically, is Gerard Batten now actually, is he the man who is going to be there? Or is he the placeholder? And in the next 6 months, it's going to change again. Now, there is only one thing that will be able to tell us that, and that is time itself. But when it comes to UKIP's leadership since Farage has left, it's been topsy-turvy, and that doesn't help when it comes to trying to get your message across, because every time because how should we say, most people are not like us. They're not constantly glued to politics and following it. So most people will kind of look at the television screen when the UKIP leader turns up and will say, "Oh, another one." Do you understand what I mean? That thing doesn't help. That's been their chief weakness. They've not been able to actually settle down on one particular leader and stick with him.
I'm just getting messages. I've just been spammed from one of my friends who's talking about the guy you were talking about earlier who recorded Sargon
yes.
and V and so on. And he's saying it was this 19-year-old kid with no position in the party, joined for like a week. He spurged, everyone ignored him. He quit. Now no one cares. So don't try. He's saying don't take that for UKIP standard stock, as it were.
Yeah, no, I know, and when you take something anecdotal, you can always say, well, that can it's misrepresentative. But at the same time, when, as you said, you're looking at a party whose average age was over the pension age, they were all old Tories. And then you get some guy who actually is younger, and it's all Jesus Christ and Christianity. That's when you get, you get images of Mary Whitehouse, if you know what I mean. And that's where I kind of wonder, where does UKIP's heart really lie? And we can be told many a thing about, oh, they're about this, they're about that. But very often it's people projecting what they actually want from politics onto the party.
Have you read their manifesto?
Sorry?
Have you read the manifesto?
No, I've never read their manifesto. I know there'll now be immediately people in the chat going, oh, he's not read their manifesto, but he's got an opinion. How dare he? Well, yes, I've also not read the Labour Party manifesto. I still have an opinion. And I think many UKIP supporters will not have read the Labour Party manifesto and will nonetheless have an opinion. In just the same way as they will have views on Nicola Sturgeon and will not have read the SNP manifesto. But you kind of you sort of think, well, mostly what we know about the Labour Party and what we know about the Conservatives is not really what they've got in their manifestos. It's what they've done when they've been in power. So that's when their principles, when their values have actually been challenged. And the problem with UKIP is they've never been in power. So we've never really got to see what they're made of. And when it came to the Liberal Democrats, people thought they were getting an image of what they were made of, and then they saw them in coalition, and as we know, they've been nowhere near power since.
No. Funny that.
And it's, I think, to a certain extent, what happened with the Liberal Democrats is precisely what, in a way, is happening with UKIP now. And that was people were projecting onto them their political wishes and convincing themselves that that is what the Liberal Democrats were about.
I think
Then they came to power and it never happened.
so. Here's one thing. So UKIP has an image problem, as everyone knows. Even they themselves will admit it. Right, something they're desperately trying to change, and something which I believe genuinely doesn't represent what they're about nowadays. Certainly, the idea that they're like BNP light or whatever is ridiculous, and everything around that. However, the fact that they're constantly tarred as far right does mean that they end up in their gaining members effectively who are
Yes.
nationalist or explicitly race nationalist, etc. And they're constantly having to turn these people away or get rid of them, or to a degree, like there's a level of tolerance for some of it, just because, as you say, they're trying to compete financially, and that's there. It's not that, and again, that's one of the reasons why Sargon, as I say, is keen to get a liberal voting block in there, so that you can offset all that and basically make it clear, and so you don't have to depend on the vote of anyone approaching, what you might describe as extreme. So it's difficult. Chat saying things like it's hard to see how UKIP could be any worse than the current traitorous bastards, or indeed the communists that we have.
One of the problems I foresee is, in a way, what happened to the Liberal Democrats, and in a way, what people are seeing exactly in the Conservatives right now. And that is that, the Liberal Democrats are famously a party that was shunted together from two independent parties. You had the Liberals and you had the Social Democrats. They formed a party, and they still have two distinct wings, one being Liberal and one being Social Democrat. Why the Social Democrats have not just left and rejoined Labour, I don't know. But yes, so that's why the Liberal Democrats are so left on everything. It is because they have got a Social Democrat part inside of them, which doesn't really care about anything liberal. So they are kind of completely hamstrung from within. And one of the problems, and this is one of the things that Academic Agent always points out, when you look at the Conservatives, they are so broad. So, I mean, until recently, they had Anna Soubry in there. So you had Anna Soubry and Jacob Rees-Mogg in the same party. How is that even possible? Do you understand what I mean? So you've got almost several parties within a party, and invariably they will clash and there will be conflict between those various wings. So these umbrella kind of structures have become so big that one wonders whether they're actually practical when something critical comes up that needs decisiveness. And when it comes to Sargon putting a lot of liberal-minded people into a organization that previously was quite solidly conservative, the question is, don't you just end up with a kind of Lib Dem scenario where you've then got a lot of liberals that are couched in with a group of a lot of conservatives, as opposed to a lot of liberals with a lot of Social Democrats?
I don't think so. Like, especially like having spoken to a lot of UKIP's management and leadership team, people like Batten, for instance, are quite heavily, they're almost libertarian. I've just been thinking back to what you've been saying about like whether or not they stand for free speech or not. And I'm just thinking of every single interview I've seen of Batten in particular, where one of the first things every time he gets attacked for having a stance on, in particular, Islam, but also the idea of things like being able to call politicians names and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
He's been very explicit in his support for the freedom to say that.
No, I appreciate that, but this is what I mean when I sort of talk about free speech. very often you will find someone taking up a position which appertains to their specific position. And when it comes to Batten, he is very critical of Islam, and of course he has got the controversial connection with Tommy Robinson, and that is where the press always kind of that's where they try and find a chink in the armor, if you know what I mean. And his retort to that will always be, well, freedom of speech. And
yes, but also, yeah.
But what I mean is, with today's moves that the Conservatives, for example, introduced, that they're against harmful content online.
Yeah. For anyone who doesn't know, this is the websites to be fined over online harms.
So
under a new proposal.
That's where I would like to know where a sort of a real sort of traditional Tory, stands when pushed, and will it really be that one then moves away from the decade-old position by the political establishment here in Britain of we must police harmful content, or do you understand what I mean? If it's specific something that appertains to you and for which you want your liberty, then everybody suddenly is in favor of free speech.
Like, I understand what you're saying, and I know what you're saying in regards to like traditional politicians, but Batten doesn't really follow that kind of trend, and in particular, I have never seen his limit when it comes to where he would believe free speech would end, but he's never.
But has he ever really been pushed on that point? Do you understand? It's I mean, what's Batten? What is UKIP's official position on the porn license?
I don't know. They have one? Off the top of my head, I don't know.
Well, no, I know. I mean, this is kind of the rhetorical question, if you know what I mean. I'm not expecting you to know that, and this is what I mean. It's very easy for the smaller parties who, this is what I mean, they've not been in power, to kind of very much choose the ground on which they wish to talk about things, if you know what I mean.
Again, but like I feel like this is a misrepresentation in terms of a lot of the people, especially at the top of UKIP, are people who did not want to be there. They're very much there fighting on the behalf of kind of their principles, which, as I say, stem quite libertarianly. I don't see any hint of the negative aspect of what the media portrays UKIP as in the leadership of UKIP.
I'm just kind of trying to give you an idea of where I'm coming from and where. So when I see Neil Hamilton, I still remember the old Tory government of which he was a part. I remember John Major's Back to Basics campaign of which he was a part. Do you understand what I mean? So to me, that's where that's where the sort of the heart of my questions regarding them is, as in, if they are really libertarians, then by all means, yeah, come out, advertise it, put it in the window. Now, I know, I'm quite certain that the likes of the Count Dankula's and the Sargon of Akkad's, they will be for free speech like Trojans. In that regard, they are the ones who are willing to die in the trenches. But when it comes to the kind of old political troopers, I'm not sure. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I'm not even sure Paul Joseph Watson would be willing to die in the trenches for free speech. I'm certain of that with Sargon and Dankula, but this is what I mean. I mean, perhaps maybe I'm being too pernickety. I don't know, but I have seen new leaders and new hopes come and go in various parties so often that I have become somewhat cynical over time.
Oh, I think definitely, but that's not entirely unfounded, is it?
Yeah. So I kind of when people kind of tell me that UKIP is this new big hope, my immediate question is, okay, fine. So what about it then? Because if I'm asked to trust UKIP specifically on the issue of free speech, and we are being told that that is supposed to be one of their strong points, then I find they're not very loud on it. Do you understand? Which is strange, given that that is supposed to be one of their selling points, and that's why I'm kind of rather wary, because to me, if there really is something that if there is some political force that can finally bring an end to just decades of walking in the wrong direction in political terms when it comes to free expression.
Like you're saying that they're not very upfront about this, but I've just done a quick Google search, and on their front-facing literature, in the second paragraph, the first proper statement they make is UKIP believes in free speech and the free discussion of ideas and beliefs within our traditional laws. We will seek to protect the right of free speech.
Laws.
Yeah, well, right, no incitement to violence.
The BBFC is also there under traditional laws. That's a blanket statement, and that's one of the problems. Ask any of the major parties if they are for free speech.
Of course, and they will say, yes, of course we are.
And, you will hear things like, oh, well, we need to teach immigrants about British values, such as democracy, equality, and free speech. You've heard them talk like that, haven't you?
I mean, like, if we go again, I've just searched their manifesto. It says, UKIP will repeal hate speech guidelines, will repeal public space protection orders, will repeal the Equality Act 2010, and will shut down the Equalities and Human Rights Commission and the Government Equalities Office to end their politically correct social engineering.
But yes, I mean, as I say, that it sounds great, but I'm just not sure that actually is a commitment to free speech.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
But put it like this, at one moment it says one is sick and tired of the whole equalities industry, because let's call it an industry. It is one. So yes, I grant that. Yes, but then that is a kind of right-wing Tory view of things. I mean, it's from that side that most resistance comes to that, and that would in a way confirm UKIP in that position as I generally tend to see them. At the same time, when it comes to rights to demonstrate, rights to say what you like at public events and not be accused of hate speech, that almost sounds tailor-made for a particular advisor of Gerard Batten's. Do you understand what I mean? This is what I mean. It's easy to see free speech in terms of one's own case, as opposed to as the overarching principle. And will you go out of your way to defend? Will UKIP defend the Labour Party or the Conservative or the person who gets thrown in the mangle because he said something? Is it something that applies to truly everybody, or is one picking and choosing the aspects of free speech of which one self is being accused of doing something wrong and saying one wishes those areas to be liberalized so that one no longer has to deal with those criticisms?
I mean, they claim all, but I admit that this is all pure. At this point, we're in speculation land, because, as you say, they've not been in real political power.
They've never been tested on these things.
Okay.
And they don't tend to, as I say, they kind of, when they talk about these areas, it's about areas in which are of concern to them in their own politicking, as opposed to we will die in the trenches for everybody's for Antifa's right to wave banners. We will defend that. It's that kind of thing. I'm waiting for somebody to actually come out from any party and just say everybody's allowed to say everything. That's the inherent problem, rather than addressing the things that their specific audience want to hear. And that has been the malaise of British politics for decades, since before, more than likely. I mean, you.
The funny thing with
that clip of mine I put out recently about Donald McGill.
I did not.
I mean, this is a guy who made postcards. He made 40 seed-sized postcards, and he ended up being prosecuted in the 50s. And you just look at it and you just go, hang on a moment. Funny postcards. Somebody got prosecuted for funny postcards. And, we now look back at that and we go, oh, well, that was, 60, 70 years ago. Oh, how silly. Yes, 60, 70 years ago, what are they going to look at what we're doing now and going to equate that to postcards? Because we still don't seem to have learned the lesson.
I mean, I can. I'm not trying to convince you, Britisher. I'm just thank you for your opinion. And I'm trying to make my mind up, as it were. I have a lot of stuff.
The chat must be hating me with a vengeance right now.
The chat. No, I mean the chat's. I don't know. Generally, does Britisher support Antifa now? I think the funny thing about
Britisher has just come out for Antifa. I am totally pro Antifa.
Yes, Antifa.
We need more people in balaclavas on the streets of Britain.
But I mean, so I'm speaking of it. I'm thinking about the perils of saying, as a political party with no nuance or context to anyone whatsoever, everyone should be able to say whatever they want. In the current political climate, I think that would be the right thing to say. But I just think in the current political climate, I can understand why you'd be hesitant. At the same time, I've got UKIP saying things about free speech, but what other party is not in favor of? Openly in favor of censorious everything.
Yes, but everybody will coat it in the veneer of liberalism. At heart, everybody is for free speech.
I mean,
liberal country, blah blah blah.
But I mean,
that's the cancer at the heart of it.
Yeah, I mean, Undoomed points out that Batten defends free speech when he defends the right of people to call him an idiot, which he has done a number of times.
Yes, I mean that something like that I can respect. Yes.
So there is that. But mainly because of the time, I'm going to move on. Thanks. You've given me some stuff to think about. Some I agree with.
It is worrying though when you've got Undoomed. When we've got sort of faceless entities in the chat. Making comments.
Of course, he really. In fact, the idea that he can be anonymous on the internet is just a disgusting travesty. Isn't that right? The Britisher.
Yes. I was rather referring to his avatar, but
I know what you were referring to. Yes.
Recently, Mr. Rubin suggested that what was it? If you had more than 5,000 followers on Twitter, you shouldn't be.
You shouldn't be.
You shouldn't be allowed to be anonymous.
Yes, I think I saw your reply tweet to that as well, where you're going, the Rubins of the world be quite all right, but can you imagine someone who's on 4999 who just sort of ticks over because they've been on the platform for 10 years,
and they're making $100 a month or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, the Rubins who are shoveling in tens of thousands and need a wheelbarrow in order to take the money away, they'll be fine. They'll live in a gated community. It will be fine for them. There won't be a problem. But yeah, I don't understand what would be the difference from someone who has 500 Twitter followers to someone who has 5,000 Twitter followers.
No, the projected reach is
the gift of the person who is saying things on Twitter how many followers he has. It's the decision of other people to follow him.
Not just that as well. Think about how many Twitter accounts cats of Instagram. Right? And all they do is post amusing and cute cat pictures all day, and they gain 1 million followers.
Yes.
Are they not allowed to?
No, they're not. No,
they're not allowed.
Also, of course, sort of spoof accounts. Sort of Donald Trump or John Burko or someone.
Yes.
People who just basically
satirize
parody account. So the moment they actually get to 5,000 followers, they have to drop the parody and Joe Blogs.
I am Joe Bloggs brackets pretending to be Donald Trump. Yeah, it doesn't work.
You look at it and you just go, I'm sorry. So, also, I mean, what's he called? Jonathan Pye. Surely he's got more than 5,000 followers by now.
So this is how comedy dies.
Yeah, so that's the end.
That's a thunderous applause.
So no, when it came to Rubin, I did react rather sternly, because I
gave him a swift backhand to the face.
Sorry,
did you,
I think you are in this field of play where you ought to know better.
Yes, you should. I do have a couple of super chats related to our previous conversation, so I'll mention those. So Talleyrand has donated £10. Thank you very much, and marvelous profile picture there, and says Hitchin's pants must be getting very tight given the current state of the Tory party. If only Tory Brexiteers would split and join the Brexit party, since UKIP is obviously a no-go. I haven't seen any evidence that
the pants getting tight over this. Sorry.
Oh, right. So he wants the Tory party to die.
Okay.
And they would be getting tight because he would be tenting.
I see. So he would literally be becoming sexually aroused over the death of the Tory party.
I mean, I wouldn't put it like that, but yes.
Okay, yes. Yeah, well, thanks for that thought.
He wants the party to die, but knowing him, he would not get a hard on, because it wouldn't die in exactly the way he'd want it to die, which is exactly what happened with the Brexit vote as well.
Then again, I mean, given his views on such matter, because I mean, he is also quite a pro-censorious person, isn't he?
Oh yes, very much so.
He would more than likely start seeing his personal arousal as being something sinful, and would more than likely.
Oh, hardly. He wouldn't indulge himself
to renew the self-flagellation.
We all know he's got a barbed whip at home.
Yes.
There you go.
Yeah.
What else do we have? We have Dr. Martin Luther Pepe donating 20 sec, saying free speech * terms and conditions may apply.
Yes, thank you very much for that, Dr. Martin Luther Pepe. Yes, I like that one. Yes.
We have Ganja Blob Flankis, libel, blackmail, fraud, extortion, etc. There must be limits on speech. Say anything is a recipe for anarchy and chaos. Do as thou will.
Of course, there must be things to prevent what would be clearly criminal actions. No one is talking about
again,
fraud legal.
When we talk about like the damage that's done, the speech is an element of it, but it's not the element that's typically policed. So it's things like libel is lying about someone to defame their character, obviously, and which is, I mean, to be blunt, it's lying. So the idea you're trying to do damage to someone's character, it's arguing in bad faith, etc.
Trying to do damage to someone's character. So basically, you're reducing their employability. You're reducing perhaps the value of their company.
So there's that aspect. Then you've got blackmail, which is forcing someone to do something against their will, threatening them. So there's the threat there. Fraud is, again, lying about something, but it's also taking money from someone. It's theft. And so is extortion is a similar thing. So it's kind of like there's speech, and then there's speech, and there's other actions involved as well. In the same way that I think the only exception I can think of where it's just pure speech is probably incitement to violence, where it's like,
when you look what they're proposing now, it is harmful content, which is just a wonderful.
I tell you what,
term.
Immediately
they've kind of the BBC, who are all behind this. I mean, they were part of the campaigning group trying to get government to do something about this. So you've now got the national broadcaster today just cheering. I mean, they're like cheerleaders.
Yeah. I mean, I tell you what, if you hold this thought, Britisher, because we're going to come back to this.
Okay.
And I've got something there, but I will just read this last one. Salad Fork, $5 Canadian. Thank you ever so much. And says, just catching the tail end here, but here's some shekels. Gas the entire EU Parliament. Farage will know his own. Thank you for that, Salad Fork. I really hope that that super chat comes through to me and isn't donated to a charity of my choice. Let's see how we go there. But no, so to go back to what we were saying, yes, there has been this story in the news today about online harms white paper. So internet sites could be fined or blocked if they fail to tackle vaguely defined online harms. Some of them are obvious, like terrorist propaganda, child abuse, that sort of thing. But there's other stuff in there that's really, really vague.
And so people are kind of immediately saying, oh, well, this is only a proposal.
Oh, yes, but it will become law.
People who say this is only a proposal don't seem to understand some of the nature of government.
Yes, they don't understand what it takes to get to a proposal.
You have to understand that the Conservative Party has now put its name to it. The Conservative government has gone out on a limb saying, we want this. Now, if they start amending it severely or whatever, it means they accepted that they were wrong. They made a U-turn. And parties don't do that. They are right. They will come out like a phalanx.
Especially
this is the correct thing to do. I commend Theresa May in this brilliant proposal. That's how they come. That's how parties work.
Especially when it comes to the vital national issues like upskirting British.
Don't go there. When you have parties kind of commit themselves to something like that, then it becomes a matter of, it's kind of a test of strength. They must get this through Parliament, so this will go through. They will more than likely already rig the consultation. I've seen that in other cases where they now put this out to consultation, so that basically means the public has now got the right to react. Now, they will more than likely already be sitting together with every single lobby group, the NSPCC, all these groups will be coming out heavily, and some of these groups will consist of 5 people and a dog, but they will immediately put their corporate name to it, if you know what I mean. And then afterwards, they will say that they've put it out to consultation, and everybody, the overwhelming majority of people were totally in favor of this. And then they will also point to the press response, so that this has overwhelming public support, and then they will go ahead with it. And who will be the one who stands up in Parliament, who says, I am against this, to then face the barrage of the other parliamentarians saying, in that case, you are pro-terrorist and pro-pedophile and pro. That's how the conversation.
Of course, like every single law that gets passed through Parliament is passed in a manner in which it is enshrined in moral language. I mean, you only have to take a look at the things which we talked about this evening that UKIP wants to repeal. Things like the Equalities Act 2010, which is anything but. Yeah, but it does sound
against equality.
Yes, are you against equality? It just reminds me of a stupid thing in one of the lectures I had where this very feminist lecturer said, I am a feminist because I'm in favor of equality, and you're all feminists if you are too. And I was like, oh, really? That's not what that's not particularly what your movement stands for, though, in terms of consequences for actions.
What do they call it? It's the Mott and Bailey technique. So, if you think of the old medieval kind of Norman castle, you've got the motte and the bailey. So the motte would effectively be the keep. That is your strong point. That is your stone tower. And your bailey is your outside area, which has perhaps got a wooden palisade around it. So the bailey is where life is much more livable. You can expand, if you know what I mean, into the bailey. You can enjoy the sunshine out there. But if and you may be able to hold off your attackers at the wooden palisade, But if things come, if push comes to shove and they manage to get through the palisade, you then retire to the bailey. So you'll be to the motte. Sorry, you'll then be in the stone tower, which is very, very difficult to get into. And
yes.
very often you will find, people like feminists and whatever will, or political people of all kind will use the motte and bailey technique. And with feminists, they will be demanding that there be fat women in adverts because this and that, and
body image and so on.
That is while they're in the bailey. And then if the opponent manages to bring some arguments that actually begin to crack that apart,
for instance, they keep dehumanizing thin women as not real people.
Then they immediately retire to the motte, and the motte technique then is I am merely for the equality of the sexes. Why have you got any problem with that? Do you understand what I mean? So motte and bailey technique.
Yeah, it's like I am for equality of the sexes, and it's like, but your actions don't reflect that, do they? You've done nothing but discriminate. But go on. It's back to what we were talking about. So this new harms thing. So the big question being, which I'm sure you know already, Britisher, but just for the sake of the audience, what are the online harms? It covers a range of issues clearly defined, such as spreading terrorist content, child sexual abuse, revenge porn, hate crimes, again, that horrible term, hate crimes, harassment, and the sale of illegal goods. But it also covers
harassment. Yes.
Sorry?
I would not even rape you. That sort of harassment.
Yeah, obviously. But it also covers harmful behavior with a less clear legal definition.
Yes, of course.
Such as trolling, cyberbullying, and the spread of fake news and disinformation.
Precisely.
Yes.
So us, basically. That's I mean, the one thing I would point to there is this. People always like to sort of say, "Oh, always obsess about pornography and whatever." Most of the things we are talking about, the arguments have long since been rehearsed and been developed in the banning of pornography in this country. And there was something which it was wonderful. It was way back when, and Jack Straw was a bit of a bogeyman of mine. I absolutely hated that man, and he was Home Secretary. It was funny when Jack Straw came to power. He wore a normal pair of spectacles, and then as he wanted to appear more stern and severe, the spectacles became smaller and smaller and rounder until eventually he looked like Heinrich Himmler. I'm not kidding. I mean, it was just ridiculous, if you know what I mean. But when he came to power, when he took office, he is supposed to have been fulminating at the office. I mean, office furniture was supposed to have been moved, if you know what I mean. The man was angry. And what it was is just before he came to power, just at the very end of the Conservatives, there was a court case. And it was a court case where some pornography publishers challenged the status quo regarding censorship of pornography. And what happened was, for the first time ever, a judge did what judges should do and said, okay, you say harm. So this material is harmful. Oh, yes, Your Honor, it needs to be banned. Fine. Prove it. And the moment that a judge looked at the prosecutor, looked at the state advocate and said, prove it, the case was abandoned.
Funny that.
Strange that. But normally the judges always simply go along with the let's say, the accepted understanding of harm.
And yes, the spirit of the thing.
There, for the first time, it was being challenged, and a judge went, okay, fine, harm. What is the harm? And then they gave a long list of, oh, these are the harms that can be. Fine, prove it. And that was it. And then, of course, the Labour Party swept into power, and Jack Straw, Home Secretary, was then told, "Oh, I'm sorry, but we've had to abandon certain restrictions on pornography and this, that, whatever." And he just blew up, supposedly. How, why, what, when? And he was told, "Well, I'm sorry, but this has been in court, and the other side won."
Yeah.
It's strange, isn't it? When the other side wins, one doesn't want to accept it. You may have heard about that in a different context. But it was after that in a way, the forces of the establishment effectively rallied, and slowly over time, one has tried to kind of repair some of the damage. So one has still lost, because the internet obviously is a huge influence in that. But one slowly kind of clawed one's way back. One introduced new legislation. So gradually
It's going to
one
be one step at a
one
time, isn't it?
build again, and they always do it by complete stealth.
Yeah, one step at a time. Have a more controversial piece of legislation taking up the limelight and slip it in at the same time.
It always circulates around this issue of harmful material, and it's always couched in those terms. Oh, it's harmful material, and if you try and challenge them, they will kind of be all Tony Blair with you, all pally. Oh, well, you see, it's not you and I we're talking about. You would be able to handle this perfectly, but it's not you. It's vulnerable people out there. It's other people out there, and they must be protected. So you could handle it, because obviously to tell you that you couldn't handle it would be an insult to you, and they obviously wouldn't want to insult you now, would they? So they concede that this is of absolutely no harm to you, but they continue to insist that it is still harmful to some others. And you wouldn't believe how far the courts have gone as to establishing, what exactly determines others. I think in one particular case, the judge actually defined it as one person, if necessary. So the entire nation needs to be regulated, because there might be one person out there who might be influenced by material.
Yeah.
So when you are faced with that sort of madness, and it's deliberately designed to be as labyrinthine and to draw you in, to try and quibble over this detail or that detail, when in fact the details are irrelevant. It's the principle of the whole thing. It is a bigger picture issue, and they never acknowledge the bigger picture. They will always draw you into trying to justify this detail or that detail, because that will always have you on the terrain they wish to contest. Whereas in reality, they are simply censors who believe that they know better what is good for you than you do.
Yes. I very much think that you should perhaps make a video, perhaps giving one of your customary speeches, Britisher, a bit rousing. We could be
with some kind of musical setting, you think?
Of course, yes.
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
I am being absolutely genuine, no joke whatsoever.
But the problem is, I think I recently did one on free speech.
Yes, I know you did, but more about attack
About
the censors, Britisher.
Yeah,
Get the edge.
You mean I should sort of set it to somewhat dark music?
Slightly
talk
black,
about,
fully black pilled music,
talk
and
about the dark, villainous forces.
well, yes, address your video as if you were in a room speaking to Anna Soubry.
Yeah, there's a reason why censor begins with a similar sounding sound as Sauron.
I just think, like, with all of these things, it's like deliberately vague stuff. Do you know what I found out today? Here's a funny thing. Because I've got a friend of mine who is he's training to become a what's the word? Like a trading standards officer, basically. And so he's just been given his first case, and he's learning all about the legal doctrine, and many of the laws which get snuck in are done so under a special piece of legislation. So there's primary and secondary legislation in the UK, for anyone who's not familiar. And if you have primary legislation, it has to be fully developed and it has to be fully debated, and then it gets passed via Commons vote, typically. And that's your traditional bills, and then it goes to the House of Lords, etc., etc. And then you've also got secondary legislation, which is where, under a piece of primary legislation, certain members of the government, be they civil servants or MPs, are empowered to pass additional primary legislation without the needs to go through all the usual gumph.
Well,
So,
no,
like, it's for temporary.
Pass additional primary legislation. They can pass secondary.
Yes, sorry, they can pass secondary legislation, which is like usually limited to a very specific niche, but they then take these special powers, which only apply to them in the context of this specific thing they're trying to pass, and then they get to bypass a whole load of proceedings, basically.
Yes. So
very dodgy.
A classic case of that are ministers. So ministers are obviously people who are kind of set aside. They're a different brand of politician, if you know what I mean. So they're not MPs. So under such legislation, they can sometimes just remarkably expand on existing legislation with the stroke of a pen. I'm trying to remember what it was. It was something Sajid Javid. You know, again, something that a lot of people, you know, many people think that Sajid Javid is definitely leadership material. You know, oh, he's a Home Secretary. He's, you know,
like most people I know go back and forth on him every week.
But Sajid Javid, I remember, was Culture Secretary. And of course, when it comes to Culture Secretary, you are then immediately in the territory of being the one who oversees censorship. I'm struggling to remember what it was, but he famously expanded something via secondary legislation. Just basically, he signed something and suddenly something was banned.
Right.
So yeah, again, not a big fan of Egghead. Yes.
No, I didn't think so. I tell you what, we are coming towards the end of our time, but so I'm going to read the last super chat of the evening, and then I'm going to bring us on to something related but more amusing than it is serious. So Tim Cornish,
as tragic as the rest of our lives. Yes.
Yes, the tragica you are now, Britisher. Tim Cornish has donated $10 and says, Britisher fan club ho. My mother-in-law describes his voice as soothing. At least one fan there, sir. So there you go. Notice that it's not Britisher and NSO fan club, but it's just you. You're clearly carrying me here.
Well, you know, what can I say? There was a reason you were the corporal in that clip.
Oh, stop it. And I do have to mention Undoomed, who says everything is kept as vague as possible so that you can be convicted at any point for any reason when you become too much trouble. And yes, we 100% agree.
Precisely it, Mr. Undoomed. But the what is so interesting is the switcheroo they do. So when they introduce these things, when they talk about these things, it's all vagary. But when you try and oppose them, it is with strangely specific things. They try and kind of, you know, get you to enter into their labyrinthine arguments. They're very keen to talk about vagary when they're proposing things, but when you come at them, they suddenly try and be incredibly specific regarding this tragic case of this poor girl that died or something like that, rather than allowing you to remain in the same ballpark of theirs of talking about these vague concepts. So that's how they kind of tend to do it.
And there we are. So I'm going to share my screen now, Britisher. Are you prepared?
Hang on. I'm presently just pasting something. I will be there with you within a second. I'm just pasting something into my sheet of news that I always try to accumulate over the week for one reason or another. Yes, I am now on this screen.
Marvelous. And I ask you to be quiet until the end of the 39 seconds because I'm going to unplug my headphones so you can hear the audio because it doesn't match up with the subtitles which are going to be there. Alrighty then. So here we go. We're going to share this. Can you see that all right?
Oh, this is one of the nation's greatest beauties, obviously.
Oh, indeed. Here we go. Ready? And off we go.
Social media can be brilliant at connecting people across the world. I'm deeply concerned that social media firms are still not doing enough to protect users from harmful content, and that's not good enough. So today, we're putting a legal duty of care on these companies to keep users safe. And if they fail to do so, tough punishments will be imposed. The era of social media firms regulating themselves is over. It's time to do things differently. It's time to keep our children safe.
And there we go. So it's just...
Yes, I would just like to just highlight one particular sentence for you.
Go on.
Now, just think Brexit for a moment. Just hold Brexit in your mind, and now remember what she said. If they fail to do so, tough punishments will be imposed.
Oof.
Funny how these things apply to some people, but not to others, isn't it?
Yeah. I just like the sentence which stands out to me is always, "It's time to do things differently," and the caption underneath being, "It's time to do things dictatorially," and it's exactly right. It's just the same rhetoric. Oh dear.
What can I say? I just I think you I think you get the drift that I've been watching this censorship game here in Britain now for some considerable amount of years.
Mm.
And it doesn't get any easier, seriously, folks. It's one thing one does learn is one doesn't quite get as angry as one did in the past.
No.
But nonetheless, it's there is still that same kind of grating sensation when you've got someone like that sitting there just telling you these things with a straight face, which she knows to be completely untrue. She knows this is a nasty law, but she wants it. And I have long since become convinced that this idea that, oh, these are all completely well-meaning people, I no longer believe that. I have seen them connive and lie. That I do believe that they kind of see the people as cattle to be corralled somehow, and that they hold a deep, deep distrust towards us, and that any lever they can get a hold of to further control us, they will seek to get.
Mm.
And they, it kind of shows that they have a deep inherent distrust towards us. And even though we are supposed to be their people, in fact, we are the people who put them in power. But they're everlastingly playing this game. I was saying on Twitter earlier, we need to, at some point, we need to have the courage to simply rid people, get rid of politicians against whom we object. Because I think it was yesterday or today that some Tory politician was telling us how terrible Jeremy Corbyn was.
Yeah.
And that's the game they play. Oh, we have just created all this censorship. We've taken away this right, that right, the other right, but reward us with your vote, because if you don't, Jeremy Corbyn will come to power. And at some point, we have to make it so that that game no longer works, because they have done this for ages now. It has never cost a British government power because they have restricted freedom of speech. Because in the end, they've always played the same game, whether it was Labour or whether it was the Conservatives. Oh, well, you've still got to vote for us, because if not, they will come to power. And, we are falling victim to the tribal attitudes of voters in this country. They're basically threatening us with the other side.
Absolutely, they do it in every single constituency. As Davey is saying in chat, gross misconduct earns you an instant dismissal, but funny how it doesn't apply to MPs and ministers.
Yes, I remember that with some. I think it was the Snoopers Charter.
Yes.
Where every single local council and whatever would have had access to an inordinate amount of data about you.
Yes.
Guess who they made exempt?
Ministers.
MPs. Not ministers, MPs. The 650 members of the House of Parliament, they would have been exempt.
Oh, because they're so special.
They would be passing things like, they would be passing things onto us, but not onto themselves.
Do unto thee, but not unto me.
Precisely.
Yes. Yes. That's all I can say to that. It's just, it doesn't surprise me in the slightest. And also, the Snoopers Charter was a funny one, wasn't it? Because it was almost unanimously rejected by the public. But when they had the whole thing, they had to shelve it. And then very sneakily, when Mrs. May became Prime Minister, it was snuck through within a month of the referendum.
And what was Theresa May's job before she was Prime Minister?
Home Secretary.
So the author of the very thing.
Oh, absolutely. It's just that for those of you who don't know, our politicians are degenerate. There you go. Do you have any closing remarks, Britisher, before I bring us to an end?
I don't know. Never trust a politician, irrespective of what color Rossetti has, whether it be red, whether it be blue, or whether it be purple. Never trust a politician.
And there you go, Britisher. I do just have one super chat, which looks like it's been retracted, actually. I don't know why. I will read it anyway, because I remember what it said. It was Tim Cornish saying, obligatory, think of the children, 20k ho, or something to that effect. So thank you very much for that, if indeed it has gone through. And if not, there we go. No harm done. Britisher's closing remark should be SPQR. That's what's
Senatus Populusque Romanus.
Of course.
I can do better than SPQR.
Marvelous. All right, thank you very much, everyone, for watching. There's an inordinate number of you this evening, and I very much appreciate it. Thank you very much to my guest, the Britisher. It was good to have a chat with you again. And
a privilege as ever.
Marvelous. And good night. Take care.
Toodle pip.